Well, welcome everyone, and most importantly, Don, we are so grateful that you're joining us here for what is the last of what's been a very exciting year-long exploration of the role that artificial intelligence is playing in shaping us and how we might shape artificial intelligence in the broadest sense. But we are so grateful that you spent the time here with us. Everybody, thank you for being here. Just a reminder that there are the chat function is active, so please add any questions that you have there, and at the end, raise your hand if you'd like to say them out loud. But again, on behalf of the Hamilton Luger School and the Ostrom Workshop, we just want to thank you, Don, for taking the time to be here today.
Okay, just a little bit quickly about Don. Don is an old friend. I dated it from 1996, and we were at a retreat together, one of Jerry Bukowski's retreats. And at that time, Don was with Apple, as I recall, and that was during the interregnum when Steve Jobs was not there, and I suppose it had some problems at that time. But Don is one of the inventors, I think, or the founders of cognitive science. He's probably the world's leading authority, at least to me, on the subject of design and human-centered design. He's a veteran of MIT, Harvard, Penn, and other places, and he's been at UC San Diego for a very long time, where he's been a leader in all kinds of things. But most importantly, for our purposes here, with the theme we've had this semester of artificial plus versus human intelligence, probably the best qualified person on this subject, because he's been following human intelligence probably more closely than anybody on Earth, while at the same time being on top of artificial intelligence since at least like the 80s. Is that right, Don?
Yeah, actually, the basic neural networks were invented in my laboratory, not by me, but by David Rumelhart and our postdoc, Jeffrey Hinton. And Jeffrey is also the one who went on and invented deep learning, and is sometimes called the godfather of AI.
Yeah, so you want this, and you're very firm about this, and I rather like it, to be a discussion and not a lecture on your side, on your part. So I want to start by asking a question, and then I'll let other people weigh in as well, on what we know and how it's different than what machines know. It seems to me that if you have a machine that can have a zillion data points, is it even going to begin to emulate what is, or replace what is true human intelligence? How do we know things that are different than a machine will ever be able to replicate?
First of all, these machines are not intelligent. Second, remember the A in the word AI. A means artificial. And so they don't work the way we do. And it's a mistake to think they do. So let's take a look at what they actually are. They're pattern matchers. What they do is they can find patterns. And that's how they work. Because they've ingested basically all the works of art and written dialogue that they could find, and that's millions or trillions of items. It's got lots of patterns. And so when you ask it a question, it basically tries to find patterns that are relevant to the question you asked. And then it just keeps, as it says a sentence, it's trying to find patterns that continue the sentence that it is producing. But it has no understanding of what it's saying. It has no ethics, it has no morals, and more importantly, it's designed by computer scientists who think that the way the brain works, it's all electrical, right? We have nerves and they have impulses and spikes, and it's electrical. They send signals from one nerve to another nerve. No, that's not how it works at all. It works by sending patterns. It works by sending both analog and digital information. The analog is the spacing of the neural impulses, but more importantly, it also is a chemical system. And the chemical system is very, very different. It's basically it's hormones. And depending on whether we're happy or stressed or sad or angry or delighted, the brain changes its operating system. when you put in the hormones, it changes the way that everything works. And so we call that the emotional system, but the emotions are extremely important. I've argued, in fact, I wrote a book about it, Emotional Design, that you have two different systems at least in the brain. This is a simplification, but basically we have the system that understands, that's the cognitive system, trying to understand what is happening. And we have the emotional system, which is trying to assess how important it is. And so those two go together. If you don't know how important something is, well, that's what the systems we have today. They don't know how important anything is. So they will just say whatever comes to I was about to say whatever comes to mind, but yeah, that's what I mean, because I'm going to talk in huge oversimplification. So I just want those of you who know what's going on to know that I know that this is a gross oversimplification. So another oversimplification is that we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is finding patterns. And this was actually noted by a famous mathematician, Poincaré, many years ago. He said that the way he solves these complex problems is he works on them, and then he gives up. And then he goes on and does other things. And then one day, or in the middle of the night, his brain interrupts me and says, oops, I got something. And so he has to then check it out, because it's really good at finding patterns that really match. And sometimes those are brilliant insights that he can now use. But most of the time it's garbage, because among other things, yeah, I can find that it has what's called a low energy state. It minimized the energy. And so it has a really nice pattern, but it can't do arithmetic. It can't do simple logic. And so he has to check it all out. And that's kind of how we work. If you have somebody who is simply spitting out stuff that their subconscious puts out, that's a disaster. And so we have a conscious filter. And, the first person who sort of talked about this was Freud. He was wrong in many, many, many things, but he did make this important distinction. And so these systems are basically the subconscious part of our doing, and they don't know what they're talking about. It's literally, it doesn't know what it's talking about.
I'm often impressed by how poorly or not at all an AI gets meaning. I mean, it might be able to write a poem because it knows how words go together, but especially with AI art, it actually, it doesn't know what I want, or it doesn't know what I mean in what I want. And I create a lot of AI art. It's fun, but it's not, I don't feel like I'm dealing with a human being. So I'm wondering, so your colleague, Gregory Hinton,
But I don't think of it as a human being. I think of it as a tool. And I have to learn how to use the tool. And it can be very valuable. It can really help us. There was a wonderful article that came in the magazine, NOMA. I don't know how to pronounce it, Noema, but with a bar across the E. And it's a book. David is at MIT and has written many, many really good articles about the role of technology and how it might displace this and that and the other. And the title of his book is AI Could Actually Help Rebuild the Middle Class. And what he's saying is that today, what does your salary depend upon? Again, a first approximation, your salary is a function of how much education you have. Or to put it in a more sensible way, the salary is a function of how hard it is to have learned the skills that you're being paid to do. How many years did it take? And so laborers, everyday laborers, they get almost nothing, even though they work hard. They probably work harder than most of us because it didn't take much time to learn how to use a shovel, or you had to do this, that, or the other. But what he's saying is, this AI can actually be a powerful tool that lets us do things that for today takes a decade, years and years and years of study or going to school to learn how to do. And we don't need that anymore if you use the tool properly. But it's a tool. And like all tools, you have to learn how to use it, and you have to learn when to trust it and when not to trust it. But I think it's going to really change tremendously the way we live and the way we work and how we think. And it's going to make us, we're going to be very careful about what we accept now as truth. You know, before photography existed, or when photography first came out, people said, oh, wow, we now know truth because the camera doesn't lie, right? Well, actually, the camera did lie a lot because, first of all, it's a function of what the photographer decided to take a picture of and from what angle, and which pictures not to show people and which pictures to select. And second of all, uh, pretty people were really skilled in the darkroom at putting together 2 or 3 different pictures, and people often couldn't detect that they were fake. And now, of course, we had more and more powerful tools coming in the electronic age, Photoshop, basically, that made it possible to make pictures that were really completely artificial. Well, so you couldn't trust pictures anymore. And now we have a tool that actually can make those pictures and make fakes, right? The deep fakes where it looks like it's somebody, it sounds like somebody you know, but it isn't this person you know. So we're going to have to be careful about this. Now, there's another thing to learn about the role of photography. When photography started to come out and actually work, it was the artists were scared to death. There's no need for art anymore because what did artists mostly paint? They painted, besides the religious paintings, they painted pictures, portraits, and they painted landscapes, and they were sort of judged by how real those pictures appeared to be. And gee, the camera did a pretty good job. And so, what's the role of art? And so this was actually a major crisis in art. But guess what? Artists said, oh, okay, so the camera can take accurate pictures of the world, but we're going to paint emotions and we're going to express ourselves and we're going to show, well, what did Picasso do? This person's face changes all the time. It depends upon how they feel, depends upon what they've eaten, depends upon what angle I'm seeing them from, time of day or night. So I'm going to paint one picture of one person with all of these different faces from all different scenes. And so there's, complete revolution in what art was about. And that's what I would hope to see with the new tools that we have today.
So we have a number of questions here. I was actually hoping some people would raise their hand, maybe I'm missing it, so we can actually have them vocalize their questions. One of them, I think, like Ken Homer, by the way, put in the chat the Gnome magazine that you sourced.
Oh, I can put that reference.
Yeah. But back toward the beginning, and you may have already answered this, but you might just want to elaborate on it. Ben Surratt asked, do you think AI will ever reach the level of real intelligence given how quickly AI is evolving? It seems to be getting better all the time at the pattern matching, but I think you said it will not achieve real intelligence, so maybe you need to push them a little harder on that. I don't know.
Well, first of all, I don't think it will. Why do we want it to achieve human intelligence? Look, here's what I really like about my tools is they don't work the way I do. Because let's take the simple tool, the calculator, which, by the way, is now pretty advanced. Calculators used to do arithmetic. Now they solve algebraic equations and they solve calculus equations as well. But the important thing about the calculator is, first of all, it doesn't work the way I do. When I do arithmetic, I make errors all the time. When I do calculus, it's a mess. Calculus is it's basically, you have to use algorithms in your head to try to figure out the solution to the problem. And the machine does it really better than any person. Now, that's okay, because, being a mathematician doesn't mean you can do arithmetic or that you can solve equations. Being a mathematician means that you can generate the equation in the first place. You can think about what the problem is. Or actually, what mathematicians do is they demonstrate that they have to prove that their hypothesis is correct. But if you take a look at what we do in engineering, where we apply mathematics, the trick is to know what mathematics to use and how to describe what is going on. And that's hard. That's the human part. Let the machine solve the problem. but let us generate it, because and then when we see the solution, we can have it, say, draw graphs and show, demonstrate what the solution really means, and then we can say, yeah, that's not what I meant at all. And so we have to rethink the problem. So again, I don't want it to think the way I do. I want it to think differently, because that way the power of it and my power, they combine to be more powerful than either of us alone. So it's really great that our tools don't work the way we do. Tools make us stronger, make us faster. We can travel better. But airplanes don't fly the way birds do, and that's just fine.
So my back is to much of the room here, and the room is filling up a bit, as you see back there against the wall. You can only see silhouettes, but and I'm wondering if anybody here, because my back is to them, has a question, and if not, I will go back to the list here. Francine Hardaway earlier here said, well, Gary Marcus, who's a big voice in the AI world and a big skeptic actually on a lot of AI claims, says it can never be much better than it is because it is running out of data to train itself. And she's asking for thoughts on that. She also says, Jan LeCun says it needs a new training model. And I'm wondering about that. I mean, the training model so far has been just memorize the internet and everything you can find out there, including everything is outright wrong, and make stuff up based on patterns. But I'm wondering about that. Are we training these things wrong? Meaning
Well, wait. It's first of all that description of how it works is wrong. It's making things up just like I'm making things up as I talk to you. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's because it works the same way. I'm putting together words to express what I'm trying to say, but I don't even know how I do that. The words just come out.
Yeah.
I mean, the favorite examples I have is when I'm giving lectures, I'm always listening to myself. We all listen to ourselves. That's how we can correct when we say something that we didn't quite mean, or we didn't think was understandable. But while I'm listening to myself, I sometimes say, oh, that's really good. Excuse me a minute, I'm going to write it down, which is evidence that I didn't really know what I was going to say until I said it. And so, first of all, we're not making it up. Second of all, it isn't just memorization. It's putting it into a very powerful structure. So first of all, what does it do? It takes apart the words and it tries to find the roots of the words, not what particular version that we use. Understanding. Well, do I need the ing? Understanding is to understand, and then the ing is a different part of speech. So it remembers it as understand. And then it knows that there's an ing tacked on in case it needs to repeat it. But it's doing very complex, interesting, deep analyses of the phrases that it's getting. It isn't rote memorization. But it's also not understanding. It simply knows the rules of grammar, not because anybody taught it, because it learned the rules of grammar by listening to a lot of grammar, the same way that children learn grammar. Children can speak completely grammatically without understanding anything. They don't know the difference between a noun and a verb and different tenses and conjugations. They just know what is good speech. Well, that's how this system works.
So I have a question, and Doc said he's tired of hearing himself, so I'll jump in in hopes that it'll encourage others to ask questions as well. When we describe artificial intelligence as a tool, I think a lot of the times we're tempted to add the word just before the word tool. But I think a lot of people have argued that artificial intelligence, though yes, a tool, is altogether different than other technologies that we've seen. Do you agree or disagree? Is it just the evolution, natural evolution from things like forks and scissors, or is it something different?
This is something different, absolutely. I did write a book earlier called Things That Make Us Smart, in which I argued that many of the tools, starting with writing and arithmetic, do make us smarter. And I argue that a lot of the modern electronic tools increase our intelligence, but it's not that we are smarter. It's that we plus the tool are now smarter. And in fact, because of the tool, many of us are sort of unable to do other things like, has my spelling gotten better? No. Maybe it's gotten worse because I rely heavily upon the system to correct my spelling as I'm typing or to tell me afterwards that word isn't right. And the same with arithmetic. I don't get to do arithmetic anymore. I just let my machines do it for me. But that's the past. It is true that look, we are in the middle of this era is an amazing time when we are in the midst of amazing revolutions. Um, Sometimes revolutions literally in countries and wars, but I'm thinking more about in technology. So first of all, new materials that never before have been seen that are lighter and stronger than ever before, or can be molded, or that can be folded up, but then they'll reshape by themselves. They'll come back to the previous version that you wanted, and they can change their shapes, and they can do all sorts of things, and have a memory for the original shape. And second of all, new sensors that can sense all sorts of things about the world, about the environment, and about the human body. Sensors that can, first of all, go into the body and send signals out, or that can even detect things inside the body without any invasion of the body. And then we have powerful batteries and motors. And so I have a new car, and I don't know how many CPUs it has in it, but it must be hundreds. I don't know how many motors it has in it. I suspect it's about 100 motors. And of course, it has this huge battery underneath that powers everything. It's an electric vehicle, yes. And then we have, of course, new advances in computation and in transportation, and yes, AI, which is, over the years, AI has had its ups and downs. We had the AI spring and the AI winter. So spring is when it's emerging, and winter is when it dies. Neural networks went through the same thing when they were first invented by a man named Rosenblatt. Is that it? Perceptrons, he called it. There was, oh, look, we can actually recognize letters of the alphabet, but that's about all it could do. And so that the hype went down. And then when the first basic neural networks added layers, which is what we did at UC San Diego, oh, the hype went up, but it didn't last very long because it wasn't very powerful. And then it's come up again. And actually, I met Jeff Hinton recently at Google. He had started a company. Google had bought it, so he worked for Google. He's now left Google, saying that he wasn't happy with the way AI is being used and talked about. And so he he said Google allowed him to say anything he wanted, but he still felt constrained because he worked for a large company. So he wanted to be on his own so he could say things freely because he is concerned. But I met him and I said, Jeff, what was it? What was the theoretical breakthrough that led to today's AI? And he said, nothing. There basically were some theoretical breakthroughs, but basically he said the real important breakthrough was that today's computers are 1 million times more powerful than the ones we were using before. And that's what enables the computers we use today to train one of these systems requires as much electricity as a town uses for an entire year. The amount of electricity being required by AI is phenomenal. And in fact, when you ask a simple question of your chat, which is today built into browsers, the amount of electricity it takes to respond to you and give you the answer means that these companies lose money every time you ask a question. And so pretty soon you're going to discover you're going to have to pay extra to be able to use these systems because, and moreover, the electric generating companies are very concerned that they don't have enough energy to supply all the demands from AI and, for that matter, cryptocurrency. Those are two huge requirements on energy. So, but yes, all of this is saying we are in the midst of a zillion different revolutions that are all going to change many, many things that we do and think about, and how we work, and how we think, how we live.
Don, don't you think that the hype cycle started at the wrong end? Because I've been following these AI people. I'm trying to figure out, where it's going to affect my own life and the life of people around me. And what I see as I get deeper in it, and then I listen to people like Gary Marcus and Jan LeCun, is that they have conflicting theories about how much AI can be improved and how much it can be improved before it has to, try different methods of training and different methods uh, of input. And I don't understand enough. I'm not an engineer, so I don't understand enough. But I know that it takes a hell of a lot of compute, as you just said. But it takes a hell of a lot of data. And at some point, at least one of these experts says that AI is going to run out of data to digest. And if that's true, how can it get better?
Don't get carried away too much. Yeah, everybody has opinions. Everybody is trying to understand what's going on and predict the future. But, it's, as my friend Herb Simon once said, it's easy to predict the future. People do it all the time. The hard part is getting it right. And so I wouldn't worry too much. Um, but first of all, as I said, I believe that the current versions of AI are powerful tools, but they're very limited, and that there will be changes. We're going to have to put stuff on top of what we have, which is basically it has to have a conscience. It has to have some deep understanding of what it's doing. It has to have some ethics, and that requires a completely different structure that we don't know how to build. We do not know how to put that into the current systems. Yet that will make a huge difference if we ever get to that point. And yes, we have to change the way they're trained. If they are trained, I wouldn't call it rote memorization, but it is kind of brute force. Look, we have lots of intelligent people in the world, really intelligent. And how did they get their intelligence? They didn't do it by reading every book or every that had ever been printed. No, that wasn't required. So obviously, that's a demonstration that you don't have to do it that way. So running out of data, yeah, people are saying we're running out of data. And so the new trend is, well, AI is smart. It will make up data. It will make up things to say, and we'll learn from that, just like it learns how to play games. But but saying things and having meaning is an open question, whereas games, there are rules for games, and you can tell who won and who didn't win. So yes, it's true that AI can play games by learning by itself. It never has to have seen it before. It can simply experiment and ends up being a world champion. But but people don't work that way. And so, yes, I think there's going to be many, many changes. I'll make one prediction about the future, and simply that in 5 years, the systems that we call AI will be very, very different than the ones we have today. Just remember, the ones we have today are really young. They're out about what, 1.5 years, 2 years. So everything is going to be changing. I see that John has had his hand up for some long time.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in front of that. Thanks for doing it. Go ahead, John. Your turn.
Longtime fan, Don. Appreciate your work. Something you said earlier about a child reminded me of a debate that's going on, and Noam Chomsky's view on machine learning and artificial intelligence, and the view that linguistics and philosophy of mind people have with the approach, this current machine learning approach, particularly that a lot of them articulate if it's the universal grammar notion of a operating system for the human mind, or that intelligence absent some form of morality isn't intelligence. I'd sort of phrase that as most of us will know somebody who's really intelligent, but is really not that smart. I'm wondering if that sort of rings a bell with you in that dissonance.
Yes. There's a nice paper that's in the communications of the ACM of all places, written by Peter Deming and B. Roos. B. Roos is a philosopher I've worked a lot. He calls himself B. And the paper is called Can Machines Be in Language? And you can tell he's a philosopher because what does it mean for a machine to be in language? But it's a really nice paper. I'll put the reference in the chat because what it does is it looks at a lot of issues in language and the way that we communicate, because we don't communicate by saying everything. We assume a huge body of knowledge in the recipient who is going to understand what we are about because it fills in what we say. So that's why we have trouble with other cultures. For example, when we speak a language and talk, they don't have the same background that we do. They have a different one. So they either can't interpret what we say or they have different interpretations. One of my friends, a sociologist, Aaron Sickerell, used to love to talk about how physicians in San Diego would try to figure out the problems from patients who would come from Baja, California. And they would both feel they were understanding each other, but actually they were completely misunderstanding because physicians, when they have a disease, they think about the causes of those diseases and and the results, whereas the people from Baja, to them, diseases are clusters of similar symptoms. And that's not at all the same thing. So they could talk with each other, but not understand each other, even though they all thought they were understanding. So, yeah. I haven't seen Chomsky's, I haven't seen his latest work, but well, yeah, he's both intelligent and smart.
Interesting distinction. Because I don't see another hand raised here, I'm going to bring something up. What you just talked about speaks to what Michael Polanyi said about tacit versus explicit knowledge. That most of our knowledge is tacit. We know what we're about to say, but we don't know how we're going to say it yet. We know more than we can tell. Is like the only quotable thing he ever said. But I can start a sentence and not know how I'm going to end it, or be ending a sentence or a paragraph and not remember how I began it. But somehow meaning will come across and other people will get it, but they won't be able to repeat it exactly verbatim unless it's really quotable. And even then, may not get the full meaning of it. And so I'm wondering, with that in mind, and that everything is going to be different in 5 years, how is our tacit knowing going to change, if at all, in some way?
How am I going to change?
You just keep getting smarter all the time, so that's how I know you're going to change. Now, I'm talking about, let me put it a different way. Our first speaker in this series was Andrew McLuhan, whose dad was Marshall McLuhan, and he's kind of carrying the torch. And one of the things, the elder, his granddad was Marshall, his dad was Eric, was a good dude too, was that we make our tools, then our tools make us. I mean, our tools are extensions of ourselves. And our phones have become extensions of ourselves. We all carry around a little rectangle with us that we almost can't live without at this point. And I'm not even sure Steve Jobs would have predicted that in 2007 when he created a phone you could write on with your finger and would have apps on it. But they've changed us. Kids can't get along without them, and they're trying to pry them out of school so kids aren't polluted by them in some way. But I'm wondering how we are changed in 5 years by the improvements or changes you're going to see in AI.
Well, there's no, I mean, the notion that the tools, that we build our tools and the tools change us, and as a result, we then change the tools. So it's a never ending, we can't live without technology, okay? our clothes are technology. How we keep warm or cool in inclement weather, it's technology. The foods are actually technology because they're mass produced and learning how to cook. Well, cooking is a technology. It required the invention of fire, or if you will, the discovery and control of fire. And everything changes us. Yes, absolutely. And these are going to change. And you're right, the new technologies, um, no, basically not everybody, but huge numbers of us always walk around with our portable communication device in our pocket. And why do we do that? Because it's really pretty powerful. If I'm lost, it tells me where I am and where I should go to, get to my target. Or if I want to answer a question, if I have a question, I can ask it and it will often give me a good answer. Or I can talk to people, or I can take notes, or I can take photographs and I can use it for memory. And it even remembers where I parked my car. So when I want to find it again, I just look at my phone and there's a little map and it shows me how to walk to my car. So it really has changed our lives in very useful, powerful ways. And it can also be negative ways. It's addictive. We can spend hours and hours going through TikTok and little screens and this, that, and the other, which are deliberately designed to be addictive, to keep us hooked and hooked and hooked and hooked. And so there are lots, but again, our lives are in many ways controlled by technology. But this has been true since the beginning of technology, first of all. And second of all, it's hardly a novel thought. I don't know how many books must have been written on this topic, but it must be hundreds or thousands. And I will not predict what's going to happen in 5 years as we invent, new, more types of technology.
Okay, so we have one question in the room and then two online. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
You just said that we cannot live without technology, and I'm not worried about technology for sure, but...
I'm sorry, your voice is difficult for me to understand.
Okay.
The sound in the auditorium there is not very good.
Okay, is this better?
I don't know. You have to say more.
Okay. You just mentioned that we cannot live without technology. So do you think that AI has the same positive effect on us as we do on it as far as its advancement on the average person?
Do I think that AI has the same positive impact on us and I couldn't understand the rest?
As we have on it as far as advancing?
I'm sorry, I can't. There's critical words I don't get.
He's asking if AI will have as positive an effect on us as we do on it.
Yes, like the average person, for example, a college student, sometimes we're now writing, like the average college student is now using AI to write its essay. Would you say that we're not becoming dumber as college students because we're relying on AI to write it and not using it ourselves?
No, I don't. Look, I recommend that everybody be using AI. You've got to learn it. If you don't learn the today's techniques, despite the fact that they're going to be different in 5 years, but I recommend you start learning how to use them, and how to understand them and know what's good about them and what's bad about them, because it's going to be required of you for the rest of your life. And this means that since they're going to be changing rapidly, you're going to have to keep up with those changes. But ideally, you should be the one driving the changes. That the people who are using today's AIs will begin to understand what they like about it and the parts they dislike. And you're in the position to make a difference, to change the way we use it and to change the way it's built and constructed. And yes, it has lots of positive things that it's doing today and lots of negative things. And so the bad guys will try to improve the negative parts, and the good guys will try to improve the positive parts. And in some sense, that's the truth of all technology. And but I really recommend. Look, when calculators first came out, they were banned from the schools. Whoa, people won't learn arithmetic. Today, they are required. I mean, you take an exam in mathematics in lots of subjects today. you're expected to bring your own calculator to the exam. Now, they're going to say, oh, wait a minute, that calculator is also a smart AI machine, so I could actually ask it what the answer to the quiz question was. Well, yes. And that means not that that's cheating. That means it was a bad quiz. It's a bad quiz if people can simply paste in what AI tells them. I'm a fan believer of cheating. And I think that the only reason, yeah, look, if I work in a company and my boss says, hey, what's this, all this new AI stuff? I don't understand it. Would you write me a short little note? And so I could start to understand what's going on. And I say, well, okay. And, but I don't know enough either. So I go talk to my friends and someone's written a nice little paper. I say, can I take some of that stuff? Can I use some of that? And I should copy that material and put it in. But in the university, you're not supposed to do that. We're only supposed to work by ourselves. So you have to lie. You have to say, yeah, it was me, yes. But no, we shouldn't lie. We should encourage people to say, yes, I took this from Anne's paper, and I took this from Henry, and I took this from something I read in the publication. Here's the reference. And look, in my latest book, and in fact, in most of my books, a lot of what's in there is not mine. My latest book, I'm proud of saying, I discussed the problems of the world, but I copied that from lots of other people. And I discussed the possible solutions, and I copied that from lots of other people. In fact, I named all the people who had written about the problems, and I named where the solutions had come from. But what I put together, what was unique, was first of all combining those in a different way. Second of all, the perspective that I placed upon it, and third of all, saying, look, the real issues are not what the problems are, and the real issues are not what the solutions are. The real issues are human behavior. And the fact that our economic system reinforces those in power, and our political system reinforces those who economics has given power to. And so what was unique was the way I put it together, and that's what we should teach people how to do. So using AI to generate the text, sure, why not? If you write something, I put my text through the AI. It's good at actually finding inconsistencies and sometimes rephrasing things in ways I say, yeah, that's even better than what I was saying. People who write papers, scholarly papers, the part you usually don't like to write is when you're all finished, you now have to write an abstract. So let the AI write the abstract. Give it the paper and say, summarize it in 200 words. Now, let me tell you, I did this with a paper. Friend sent a paper and I didn't feel like reading 30 pages. So I asked AI to summarize it for me. And I said, that's a pretty good summary. And I sent it to my friends who said, yeah, it looks like a good summary, but it leaves out the most important parts of the paper. But see, that's okay, because what it does is it provides you with a framework, and you're the author of the paper. You can say, but it left out the important part. So I can add that to the abstract. But the combination, it did a lot of the grunt work for you, and now you tune it. But the other point was, I said, if it really missed the most important part of the paper, maybe that's telling you something about the paper. Maybe you didn't emphasize what you thought was the most important part well enough. So we should use these tools and don't be afraid to, but we should also say when we use the tools and give it credit.
So you just touched on the crux of my question. You are at the juncture of culture and technology as much as anybody I can think of. And what culture is not typically considered, language or whatever, as a rivalrous, capital-intensive good. Technology, we have been trained to think of as the thing that comes from capital formation, privatization, corporatization. And AI right now in its youth is extremely capital intensive, more so than almost any technology we've run across in decades. How do you think of this quandary, what I would call a quandary, right, between the public good, the non-rivalrous public good of culture, and the way AI is being pursued right now at scale?
That's a good question. And let me answer it, though, by not talking about AI to start with. Because I think a lot of the new technology is giving power to the powerless people of the world. Telephones, well, telephones used to be fixed to a location, right? Landlines, they're connected by wire. And the first cell phones were big and bulky and expensive. But today, almost everybody has a phone. Yeah, in the United States, we have to pay maybe even $1,000 for the new modern uh, Apple iPhone or even an Android phone. But in many countries of the world, you can get very good smartphones for like $30, reasonably expensive, inexpensive. Even for people who don't have much money, they are affordable. And these are changing lives. They're changing the lives of farmers, for example, and fishermen who can find out what the market prices really are and not have to rely on a middle person who's taking away most of your profits. And it has changed the lives of many, many people. And on top of that, it's a computational device. So all sorts of new kinds of simple computers are being made out of cell phones. And you can use that to do all sorts of predictions. And for that matter, we now have Arduino, which is again, a very simple computer, but very powerful and designed deliberately so you can hook up all sorts of things and do things that are really very good for well, everything. You invent it. So many everyday people who don't really understand technology, don't have much of an education, are still using a lot of these very inexpensive and yet powerful tools to do good things for themselves, for lives. I mean, I was once in Kenya in the middle of the Masabi warrior cities. I spent a week with them, and I was I was the only foreigner there. But you know, they would have their huts in a circle, and they would have a circle of thorns around it, which they would open up in the morning to let themselves out and in, but they would close it at night so animals couldn't get in. But they had electricity. They had old solar cells, and they had automobile batteries that were sort of used. Their life for the automobile was over with, but they used that to be charged by the solar cells, and they could power radios and television sets. And and they were using technology in very effective ways for the way they lived. And so I think that all technology starts off being extremely expensive and extremely complex, but ends up being very inexpensive and cheap and ubiquitous all over. Because the most powerful technology is not the leading edge, it's the trailing edge. Because the trailing edge is inexpensive and reliable. It's been around for a long time. A lot of the bugs and difficulties have been taken away. And so I think that will happen with AI, that these are going to be built into our phone. In fact, the next set of phones are going to have these very, very powerful chips that they can do a lot of the computations by themselves. They're not going to be using a traditional CPU. They're going to be using CPUs deliberately designed to do the kinds of computations, matrix multiplication, for example, that AI does. That's what the new servers are using, new chips being made. They're very expensive today, but wait, the prices have always come down very, very rapidly. And so I think it's going to be powerful for everybody. That's what the paper that I was mentioning before by David Autor was about, was that people without much technical background can start to use this to dramatically do things wonderfully that it took people with great long education and experience to be able to do. And yes, there is a difference between extrinsic and intrinsic knowledge. And so there's a lot of our understanding we don't even know that we have. And so when people ask us how to do a task, we never discuss all this other kind of knowledge that we have about what can be done and not done. I mean, I'm reminded of the following example from one of my students who was studying how people did things in their office. So he was studying how a company handled purchase orders as they came in, how they took care of them, how they entered into the system, how they actually translated the purchase order into an actual shipment of a product. And the rules were very simple, that you don't ship the product until you get an official purchase order and it's been paid for. And so what he did, my student did, is he wrote down all the rules that they told him, and he wrote them down, and then he brought it back to them, and he asked them, "This is now how you do it?" And they would say, "No, no, you forgot this or that, that." And so he would modify it, and pretty soon they said, "Yes, that's exactly what we do." And then he came back about a month later, and he watched them, and they weren't doing it. And he asked them, "Well, wait a minute, you said this is how you do things." And they would say, "Oh, yes, that's how we do things, but this was a special case." But it turns out, as he watched, almost every case was a special case. And so, yeah, that's going to be where the power comes with people, that, yeah, the machine can do it, but not when it's a special case.
Thanks, Don. This has really been very fascinating and informative, and I really appreciate the distinction about computers not thinking, but just recognizing patterns. In his final book before he died, James Lovelock wrote a book called Novacene, The Coming Age of Hyperintelligence. And he said there's something very interesting that both what he calls inorganic intelligence, artificial intelligence, and humans share the same goal. We have to keep the planet cool. If we heat up to 116 degrees Fahrenheit, it's game over. We could very quickly enter into a Venus-like state, and there'd be a complete wipeout. So my question, and I am going to ask you to kind of predict a little bit here, is do you see a point at which the pattern recognition of large-scale artificial intelligence systems start to say, hey, we have to change radically the way in which humans are interacting with the planet because we're all going to perish?
Well, there are lots of books who have had that argument. It's called science fiction, but I learn a lot from science fiction. I'm friends with a number of authors of science fiction. For example, David Brin, who lives nearby, writes a lot of science fiction. He also happens to have a PhD in physics. So a lot of the authors are actually quite intelligent about what they're writing. And so their predictions are useful. And so, yeah, but I don't think, see, computers can't do much except think today. But if you take a look at the advances in robotics, the modern robotics can move about and dance and jump and lift and solve problems, but they have a body. And there have been lots of philosophical arguments is that a disembodied intelligence is not intelligent, that our body, we evolved actually to move around in the world and to change things and move things around and move ourselves around and manipulate the world. So, but the robotics are starting to do that. And now if we add the large language models to the robotics, that's going to be a very different kind of beast. And that's going to happen. People are already working on it. And so actually, I think you're wrong about when the temperature gets to 116 degrees, life will perish. Yeah, life may perish, but these intelligent machines will figure out a way of either working at higher temperatures or cooling themselves. But what I'd like to tell people is that people are very good at responding to disasters, but they're not very good at preventing the disaster in the first place. So here's the good news about climate change. Climate change is causing fires and floods and hunger and devastation all around the world. That's the good news. And why is it good news? Because for the first time, people are taking it seriously. Now, we're not going to take it seriously enough in time to stop the rapid rise of temperature. Now, mind you, the climatologists love to talk about temperature as another 1 degree or 2 degrees of warming is going to devastate the world. And most people can't understand that because the temperature changes more than that every day. What are you talking about? Because they're not talking about temperature. They're talking about heat. And they're not talking about weather. They're talking about climate. And those are very different things. And so one of the problems is people have real trouble understanding what's going on because temperature fluctuates and weather fluctuates so much that they can't understand that a 1 or 2 degree change in what climatologists talk about can make a difference. But eventually it will. Now, the question you've asked is, will we catch on in enough time, first of all? But second, will the people who are in power today And their power comes from from their businesses that are actually destroying the planet. And so they may not care what happens to people. What they care about what happens to them as long as they're alive. And that's where the danger comes. The decision makers of the world are the ones who are not so sensitive to the destruction that's happening or is about to happen. What's the role of AI? I don't think there is a role in that. That's human behavior. Now, you're right. That's why people say, well, the machine will take over and rule our governments, and it's very logical. Yeah, but logic isn't how we work. I like to tell engineers the problem with what you say is it's too logical. Logic is an artificial way of thinking. Logic was invented by philosophers and mathematicians. It is not how people think.
Can you hear me if I speak without the microphone?
That was clearer than people would
Yay!
usually.
Okay. I was born for this moment, Don. The first question, and there's sort of maybe a two-parter here. When we think about human-centered design for artificial intelligence, I think a lot of the times we're thinking about doing it with the intention of solving real problems that humans have, right? But what about when we start thinking about artificial intelligence that is designed to act upon the user, for example, in the cases of artificial intelligence in education? And I'm not talking about AI that has educational applications, but AI that is specifically designed to be used, let's say, in a K-12 classroom or something like that. Do you have any concerns about that type of process? And the follow-on here is, you've sort of expanded your thoughts from the need to, as sort of one of the principal proponents of human-centered design, to thinking actually beyond just the sort of navel-gazing, I think you've called it, of the individual that needs to use the thing, to the broader society in which the tool is going to be placed in. But how do we do that with artificial intelligence when the people that are making it do not represent really the society that it's impacting?
Well, there's a lot in there, but let me start from the human-centered design, because I've been teaching human-centered design for a long time. And this is the book that I mostly use, and many of you may know about that book. And human-centered design, I now have decided, is wrong. So what I've been teaching is wrong. Now, it's interesting because everything that I say about you should do in order to do a good product with human-centered design, I still believe in and I still teach. What's wrong is not what I say. What's wrong is what I do not say. And so, Eli Blevis, who's actually a professor at IU, years ago wrote a paper in which he talked about humanity-centered design. And when I was trying to think about what should I call this new approach that I'm doing, I found that paper and decided to call what I'm doing humanity-centered design. So this is the new book, which is designed for a better world. That has to be meaningful. That means the economists have to stop talking the way they do and start talking about real behavior and not just measuring everything, even things we can't measure. Sustainability, that speaks to itself, I think, and humanity-centered. What am I talking about with humanity-centered? Well, how we destroy the earth and we mine to get the materials to make these exotic, wonderful, beautiful things. We destroy the earth when we then smelt it to get it into a form that we can use, and we destroy it when we do the manufacturing, and we destroy it because we make our money by selling products. So we don't want people to have that product last too long. Wouldn't it be nice if you had to buy a new phone or a computer every 2 or 3 years, a new automobile every 5 years, a new refrigerator every, 7 or 8 years, a new television set every years? And so that stuff, and you make it so slim and wonderful and beautiful that you can't easily take it apart and reuse the components, and so it's destroying the earth, polluting the earth and the atmosphere and the waters. And so we have to think as a system. We have to think about the impact we have upon the ecological system and upon all life, plants, animals of all sorts, because this is a complex system. And when you destroy one thing, it has impact on almost everything else. And so and finally, I said, yes, we should use the principles of human-centered design. I consider that humanity-centered design, the way I'm talking about it, is human-centered design, but expanded. So instead of calling it HCD, I call it H plus CD. But one of the things that is different is we teach our people, well, you want to design something for somebody, well, you go and send in the anthropologist and you do the ethnography and you try to understand what their needs are. And then you come back and you figure out a solution to their needs. And then there you have it. You have a product. Because this design is as a tool of industry to help them sell more products and make more profits. And I say it's about time we switched. Design is too important to be simply something to allow people to make more money. We can solve societal problems, but it's a way of thinking in which you look at not the symptoms, but you try to figure out what is the underlying causes, and you address those. And that's really important. And when you talk to societies, well, the British went into India and said to Indians, well, you don't run your government very well, so we'll help you. We'll run your government for you. Isn't that nice? That's colonialism. And the Indians certainly didn't like that. And so we're doing the same thing. We go out to all these other countries and we go in and we study for a couple of weeks and we come back and we say, oh, we saw all those problems and here's the solutions. Or the big foundations and governments, the United Nations, among others, or the State Department sends their experts into another country who study the problem and come back and do a very nice analysis and say, well, you give us $10 billion and give us 10 years and we will solve this problem. Now, the experts are expert. They understand the problem. And so they produce a very sensible system, except they don't understand culture. They don't understand the people. They don't understand how they live. And so giving somebody something and saying, this is what you need to do to be better, nobody likes that. And so I say we have to do is what's called participatory design or collaborative design, co-design. We have to make the solutions that come from the people. People don't have to send in anthropologists to figure out what their problems are. They know their problems. They even know the solutions, but the solutions are often based on the symptoms, the surface, not the underlying problem, because the underlying problems are harder to solve. And that's where designers can help. And that's where our new technologies can help. And I just went on a riff. Sorry about that, because I now lost track of the question you actually asked me.
That was an awesome. I want to bring up something that John Wunderlich said in the chat. Privacy is this gigantic problem that we're dealing with in part because these machines are busy knowing much more about us than we would like them to know. And they're working for people who are more powerful than we are. But he says, I talk about user beneficial design since some of the most privacy invasive systems we deal with are user-centered in the same way that hog farms are hog-centered. And what strikes me about that is that, well, the hogs don't run the farm. The hogs are being farmed. Right. We're being farmed in many ways. How do we turn that around? I mean, you just talked about that. This has to come up from the people, but I don't even like the people being at the bottom. We're kind of everywhere. We're at the sides. We're not just the bottom feeders here or the bottom of some pyramid. So how's that happen?
Well, it happens in several ways. One of them is the legal system, because what governments are about is trying to do is a good government is trying actually to balance the benefits and the harms, et cetera, for people. And so the EU is doing a good job, I think, of trying to regulate privacy and trying to regulate AI and trying to regulate the harmful part of AI, not the good part. And but it's difficult. And one of the problems, it's really difficult to regulate if you regulate too soon, you may stop things that actually could be better, and you may not catch all the important parts. But if you regulate too late, well, it's too late. It's really hard to go back and change what people are now getting used to. So, but I really believe that regulation should come from governments, and so we have to play a more important role in government. And it really annoys me when technologists, well, Bill Gates, for example, wrote a wonderful book of how to solve the climate change problem. But he said, I'm not going to do politics. I'm not a politician. Well, sorry, Bill, because all the issues you talk about are political problems. And unless you understand politics, nothing that you talk about will actually get done. And finally, with privacy, privacy is an artificial concept. And I have a feeling that our understanding of privacy may change. Different cultures have different notions of what is private and what is not private. I mean, my friends in Japan used to tell me that in theory, well, they live in homes which often have thin walls, and you can hear everything else that goes on. But they're very private, and you don't feel that anybody knows what you're doing. But my Japanese friends say, yeah, come on. We know everything that they are doing. We simply don't tell anybody about it.
That's good. Do you follow regulatory developments? Like right now, there's a privacy. Just this morning, I read about the new national privacy law that's apparently bipartisan. People like it. I joked in the chat that too many regulations protect yesterday from last Thursday. We have a lot of yesterdays now.
Let me remind you, though, that is not legislation. The two major committees that are responsible have finally agreed, but it has not gone through the Congress.
Okay.
So it is not yet legislation.
What would you like there?
That's a really hard problem, and I don't know the answer. I don't even know what I would like, because it's really difficult to, well, suppose that I were in charge of Facebook or X or Twitter, and I was trying to say, look, I want free discussion. I think that having discussion with people with different ideas is very important. It's how we make advances. And I want people, though, not just to listen to the things they already agree with. I want people to listen to things they disagree with. That's why I make a point of in the mornings reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, both, because they have different opinions and different views, but both of them are intelligent. They discuss them intelligently. But how can you allow that? And what is the line that you draw about where someone is giving you an opinion that you think is disgusting or maybe even immoral? But what people think is immoral or not, that first of all, it changes with time, and second of all, it's subjective, and it's really hard to do that. And then if you have people making lies up, well, you don't always know that they're lies. You don't even know. I mean, it's very hard to tell often from this when people are doing it in a sophisticated way. And so it's very hard to pass regulations that will solve this. And, most of our lives are decent because we learn decency when we grow up, depending upon the culture in which we grow up in. And a lot of the things that most of us have learned in growing up, especially those of us who are in a university setting, are being violated all the time now. But I don't know how we stop it or how we correct it, because it's basically the Wittgenstein's notion of categories. Categories don't have firm boundaries. There are things that are, they're basically prototypes, and then as you get further away from the prototypes, it gets more problematical. But there's no magic line that says this is good and this is bad.
So we have time for one more question, and that's coming from Adrian Dropper.
So we've sort of landed on regulation towards the end here, and it is very, very difficult. What is your thinking about regulating transparency as a step in solving both the privacy and the regulatory issues in general. And
I'm
the
I'm
role
a
of
fan
AI,
of, yeah, actually, I hate the word transparency because something that's transparent is invisible. And yet the word means when we say we want something to be transparent, it means I want it to be more visible what's going on. I'm in favor of that. But actually, it's interesting because if you really believe in everything should be visible, transparent, there goes privacy.
right?
And well, actually, David Brin, once again, the science fiction writer, once wrote he does a lot of nonfiction as well, and he's on a lot of panels and government panels. He argued basically against privacy. Why do we need privacy? Think about that. A lot of cases where we don't want privacy is if we're doing something illegal, yes, I want privacy. But what if I'm doing something that other people would consider immoral? Well, maybe that's okay. I mean, yeah, there's the title of the book, The Transparent Society, written in 1998, a long time ago. I think he has a new version coming out. Will technology force us to choose between privacy and freedom?
I'm not talking about privacy only at the individual level.
Well,
I'm
but you mentioned
about,
once you mentioned transparency, and I'm a favor of it, and I think
well, we're
that
not
should apply.
regulating individual behavior. We're talking about regulating corporate behavior. And that's the sense in which I'm asking the question.
And I deliberately expanded it, but there's only one place where corporates legitimately are opaque, because the way that the competitive system is supposed to work is that I build a product and now I can patent it so other people can't copy it directly. But patent is, by the way, deliberately made public so that other people can learn from the ideas and try to do something like it, but in a different way. So that's kind of interesting, opaque and transparency. But while I'm in the process of inventing, I want that to be opaque. I do not want my competitors to know what I'm working on and what I'm doing. After I release the product, then I can talk about it a lot. But oftentimes, the patent system is a deliberate system meant to protect novel ideas for a relatively short amount of time, enough time so people can recoup the expenses of doing it, but to make the ideas public. So it's a really the way it's supposed to work. It's a really interesting mix of transparency and opaqueness. And I think that's the one place where I think companies have a right to keep things secret. And that's in companies I've worked in. Everything was transparent except what they were working on, products that might come out in the next couple of years. Does that acceptable to you?
Not in the sort of Facebook moderation regulation. A lot of the regulation that discussions that we're seeing, both EU and here and elsewhere, is sort of focused on operational transparency, not product development transparency. But anyway.
No, you're right. And there, I think it should be fully there we should be aware of what is going on and the rules they're trying to develop, how they're developing it, and how they're applying them. And moreover, also the discussions in the before Congress or before government bodies, that should be always public.
Okay, so we're pretty much out of time here, but we know you have something to plug. And I'm thinking you already showed us your book, but is there an award thing that you've got going right now? And I'm searching while we're running this thing. And I can't.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick pitch on that. A lot of my friends said, "Oh, we'd love to have an award in your name, Don." And I resisted that for a while. And they finally convinced me, okay. When they wanted to do, we're going to we're going to raise money and we'll give an award to some famous designer who's done a tremendous amount of wonderful stuff. And I said, no, because if you're famous, you get an award. So what? I mean, it's nice. It's nice, but it's not going to change your behavior. So I said, why don't we give an award when it means something? How about when you just start out? And so what we're doing is the Don Norman Design Award and Summit is going to say, we want to find early career people in the first few years of their careers who are actually doing something. They're not designing something. They're not writing a paper. They're actually doing something in the world that they have evidence that it has improved people's lives. And what kinds of projects? Well, take a look at the United Nations list of 16 sustainable development areas. Now, they have 17, but number 17 is simply these problems in the world are so large that in order to solve them, we're going to have to band together. So the first 16, though, listed all of the major issues: hunger, discrimination, education, sanitation, health. And I was said, we will look at that and we'll say, you have promise. And the award will be for people with promise. They won't have much, they won't have gotten very far. They don't have much money, but this will help them get more money and get noted. But they have to have evidence. And then I also want to give a secondary award to educational groups, whether formal groups like Indiana University or boot camps, people who are training people to go off and do the societal work. Now, they just get an award. That's not a contest. If they pass the criteria, and the main criterion is that they can demonstrate that their graduates are off doing really good stuff for society, not for companies, but for society. And so we've started it. We now have hundreds of people who have downloaded our applications. The deadline we have two different deadlines depending upon the status. April 15th is one of them. May 31st is the other. We hope to give out the first awards in November. And people from all over the world are submitting applications. And so this is pretty exciting. If you want to learn about it, it's the Don Norman Design Award, DNDA.design. So that's the internet address, DNDA.design.
Cool, thanks. Tom.
Okay, I just typed that in, and I hope we could save the chat this time. We had we're good on that.
You have to save it now before we hang up.
Yeah, it's in the cloud, and we all know where that is. So it's in the weather.
I don't know. That's over my head.
Don, thanks so much. This has been a fabulous hour and almost a half. So, and next time you come to IU, let us know ahead of time.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Don. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. We enjoyed it.